Charlotte Sylvie had one rule: never speak to Armando Mancini unless he spoke first. But desperation has a way of breaking even the most carefully constructed rules. Standing in the doorway of the most dangerous man in New York's office, she whispered 6 words that would change everything. "Please, could you be my husband for one day?" She stood in the doorway of his office now, the place she'd been explicitly told never to enter unless summoned, watching him work. The late afternoon sun poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into a glittering backdrop behind his mahogany desk. He sat perfectly still, reviewing something on his laptop, his dark suit tailored like armor, the brim of his black hat casting shadows across features that could have been carved from stone. Tattoos crept up his neck, markings she'd glimpsed but never dared study. Everything about Armando Mancini screamed danger, the kind of man whose silence was more threatening than another man's rage. Charlotte's fingers twisted in the pale blue fabric of her maid's uniform. 6 months of cleaning his floors, polishing his desk, moving through his world like a ghost, all of it had taught her how to survive in his presence. Be invisible, be efficient, be nothing. But today, she needed to be seen. "Sir?" The word barely made it past her lips. He didn't look up. His fingers continued moving across the keyboard with precise, unhurried grace, the movements of a man who knew the world would wait for him. Charlotte's pulse hammered. She could leave. Should leave. Turn around, go back to the supply closet. Forget this insane idea. I need to ask you something. The words escaped before courage abandoned her completely. Something unusual. Now he looked up. Dark eyes, nearly black in the golden light, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When Armando Mancini looked at you, really looked at you, it felt like he could see every secret you'd ever buried, every lie you'd ever told, every desperate thought you'd tried to hide. "I'm listening," he said. His voice was low, controlled, with the faintest trace of an accent that wrapped around consonants like silk over steel. The kind of voice that could seduce or sentence with equal ease. Charlotte swallowed hard. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together to stop the trembling. "I need you to pretend to be my husband." The confession tumbled out in a rush. "Just for one day." The silence that followed felt like drowning. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Armando leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. He set down his pen, a deliberate movement that somehow made the moment more terrifying. "Your husband," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "You need me to pretend to be your husband." "Just for one day," Charlotte rushed to clarify, her voice breaking. "My sister's engagement party is this Saturday, just a few hours. I know it's crazy. I know I shouldn't even be asking, but I don't have anyone else, and I told them I was married. And now they want to meet him, and—" "Why?" The single word cut through her rambling like a blade. Charlotte blinked. "Why? Why did you tell them you were married?" What could drive a woman to ask the most dangerous man in New York such an impossible favor? The answer lies in a lie told 6 months ago, a family who wouldn't understand the truth, and a maid who'd learned that sometimes invisibility isn't protection, it's prison. But what Charlotte didn't know was that her innocent request would unravel everything Armando Mancini had built his empire to protect, including the heart he'd forgotten he still had. 6 months earlier, Charlotte had been desperate for any job that paid more than minimum wage. Her mother's medical bills were piling up. Her younger siblings needed school supplies. The landlord had started leaving notes on their Brooklyn apartment door, polite at first, then less so. When the employment agency mentioned a housekeeping position in one of Manhattan's most exclusive high-rises, she'd said yes before they'd even finished describing it. She should have asked more questions. Armando Mancini's name didn't mean anything to her then. She didn't know that his import-export consulting firm was code for one of the most powerful crime families in New York. She didn't know that the other staff members never made eye contact with him, not out of respect, but out of pure, primal self-preservation. She didn't know that the men in dark suits who flanked the building's entrance weren't just security. They were soldiers who'd killed on his orders without hesitation. She didn't know that the gleaming penthouse office where she now polished windows and emptied trash bins was where empires were negotiated and enemies were erased. She learned all of this within the first 2 weeks. By then, it was too late to leave. The money was too good, better than anything she'd ever made, and her family needed it too desperately. But the money came with a price: complete invisibility, no questions, no curiosity, no personal connection to the man who owned the space where she worked. She cleaned around him as if he were furniture. He acknowledged her as if she were air. It was an arrangement that worked: cold, sterile, safe. So when her sister Jasmine had FaceTimed her 3 months into the job, asking why Charlotte never had time for family anymore, why she was always too tired to visit, why she looked so worn down, the lie had slipped out before she could stop it. "I met someone," Charlotte had said, desperate to deflect Jasmine's worry that something was wrong. "We're getting serious." Jasmine's squeal of joy had echoed through the phone. Within minutes, their mother knew. Within an hour, cousins were texting congratulations. Within a day, the lie had grown wings she couldn't clip. "When do we meet him?" her mother had asked on the next call, voice warm with hope. "Soon," Charlotte had stammered. "We're just taking it slow." But slow hadn't been slow enough. 2 weeks ago, her family had started planning the engagement party for Jasmine. The big kind, where aunts drove in from Delaware and church friends brought their famous dishes. The kind where everyone expected to meet the mysterious man who'd finally captured Charlotte Sylvie's heart. "Bring him," her mother had said in that tone that wasn't really a request. "It's time we met this man who's got my daughter smiling again." Smiling? That's what her mother thought? In reality, Charlotte barely slept. She lay awake in her small room near the office kitchen, listening to the sounds that sometimes drifted from Armando's late-night meetings. Sharp voices, threats delivered in Italian and English, the kind of conversations that made her bury her head under her pillow and pray she'd heard nothing. She should have confessed the truth then. Should have admitted there was no boyfriend, no relationship, nothing but a desperate lie to keep her family from seeing how far she'd fallen. But she couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear her mother's disappointed sigh, her grandmother's sympathetic headshake, Jasmine's well-meaning concern that Charlotte had sacrificed her own happiness to keep everyone else afloat. For once, just once, she wanted them to think she was doing okay, that she hadn't given up everything, her dreams of college, her social life, her own apartment, just to survive, that someone, somewhere, thought she was worth choosing. So the lie had continued to grow. And now, standing in Armando Mancini's office with her heart hammering against her ribs, she was paying the price. "Your husband," Armando repeated, setting down his laptop screen with deliberate care. He stood, moving around the desk with the fluid, predatory grace of a man accustomed to controlling every room he entered. Charlotte forced herself not to step back. "Just for one day. Saturday, a few hours at my sister's party. I know it's insane. I know I shouldn't even be asking, but..." Her voice cracked. "I told them I was married, and now they want to meet him, and I don't have anyone else, and I'll do whatever you want. Extra hours, extra work, Why?" The question stopped her cold. "Why?" she echoed. "Why did you tell them you were married?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with something she couldn't name. Charlotte's first instinct was to deflect, to give some surface answer, but something in Armando's expression, not judgment, but genuine curiosity, made the truth spill out. "Because I'm 26 and still cleaning offices," she whispered. "Because my sister is getting married and I can't even afford to go back to school. Because my mother is 61 and still works 2 jobs, and I can't earn enough to tell her to stop." Her voice broke. "Because every family gathering, they look at me with pity, and I just wanted, for once, for them to think I was okay, that someone thought I was worth choosing." Her eyes burned. She would not cry, not here, not in front of him. Armando was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "What did you tell them about this husband?" Hope flickered like a dangerous flame in her chest. "That he's successful," she said carefully. "That we met through work. That he treats me well." She paused, barely breathing. "That he makes me feel safe." Something flashed across Armando's face, an emotion too quick to identify. He took another step closer, and Charlotte could smell his cologne now, something expensive and darkly warm, cedar and smoke. "And do I?" he asked quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Make you feel safe?" Charlotte's breath caught. The honest answer was no. Armando Mancini terrified her. But standing here now, with his full attention on her for the first time in 6 months, she realized something else. He'd never once made her feel small. "You make me feel," she searched for the right word, "seen." The confession hung between them like a spark in darkness. Armando studied her for one more unbearable moment. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Saturday," he said. "What time?" The training began the next evening. Charlotte had expected a quick briefing. Names, dates, a few rehearsed lines. What she got instead was Armando Mancini sitting across from his penthouse dining table with a glass of wine and a focus that made her feel like she was being interrogated. "Your mother," he said, pen poised over a leather notebook. "Tell me about her." Charlotte blinked. "Her name is Dorothy. She's 61. She works at—" "Not her resume." Armando's eyes lifted to hers. "Tell me about her. What makes her laugh? What makes her suspicious? If I say the wrong thing at this party, what will make her pull you aside and ask if you're really happy?" The question caught her off guard. Charlotte set down her water glass, thinking. "She's proud," Charlotte said slowly. "Too proud. She'll insist on serving you herself, even though Jasmine hired caterers. She'll ask about your job, your family, your intentions, and she'll know if you're lying. Then I won't lie." Armando made a note. "Your father?" Charlotte's throat tightened. "Gone. Left when I was 12. Armando's pen paused. He didn't push, just waited. "He said he was going to the store," she continued, voice carefully neutral. "My mother still doesn't talk about him, so if anyone asks—" "He's not part of the story," Armando finished. "Understood." Something in the gentleness of his tone made her look up. For a moment, she thought she saw understanding in those dark eyes, the kind that came from experience, not sympathy. "What about exes?" he asked, moving on. "Anyone I should be prepared to encounter?" Charlotte's jaw tightened. "Darius Jenkins. He'll probably be there. He's friends with Jasmine's fiancé." And he told everyone I was too boring to keep." The words tasted bitter even now. "Said I had no ambition, no fire, that I'd spend my life scrubbing other people's floors." Armando's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "Is that when you told your family about the husband?" "No, that came later." Charlotte met his gaze. "After I realized he was right." "He wasn't." The words were quiet but absolute. Charlotte's breath caught. Before she could respond, Armando stood, rolling up his shirt sleeves. "Let's practice. Pretend we just arrived. I'm meeting your mother for the first time." Over the next 3 evenings, they rehearsed. Charlotte learned that Armando noticed everything. The way she deflected compliments, how she apologized for taking up space, the fact that she never ordered what she actually wanted at dinner. "If I'm your husband," he said during one session, "I would know you prefer your tea with honey, not sugar. I would know you hate small talk but love old jazz. I would know—" He paused. "That you hum when you think no one's listening." Charlotte froze. "You've heard me?" "Every morning for 6 months." The admission settled between them like something fragile and dangerous. She started noticing him too. The photo that used to sit on his desk, a dark-haired woman in a silver frame, was gone now, leaving only a faint dust outline. The scar on his left wrist, thin and white, that he unconsciously touched whenever someone called his phone. She never asked. He never explained. But the silence between them started to feel less like fear and more like understanding. On Thursday night, Armando had his private chef prepare a trial dinner. "Practice for Saturday," he said. They sat across from each other at the candlelit table, and Armando told a story about the first time he'd tried her mother's profession, housekeeping, as a teenager in Naples. "I was terrible at it," he said, the faintest smile touching his lips. "My nonna said I cleaned like I was punishing the floor." Charlotte laughed, really laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. Armando went completely still. He stared at her like he was seeing color for the first time, like that laugh was the first sound he'd wanted to hear in years. The look in his eyes made her chest tighten with something she didn't dare name. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Just don't stop." The moment stretched, warm and terrifying. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. One of Armando's men appeared in the doorway. Marco, the one with the cold eyes. "Boss, delivery." Armando's expression shifted instantly, warmth replaced by ice. "Not now." "It's from the Volkov crew. Needs your attention." Charlotte watched Armando's jaw tighten. He stood buttoning his jacket. "Excuse me." She nodded, suddenly remembering where she was. Who he was. As Armando walked toward the hallway, Marco handed him a manila envelope. Even from across the room, Charlotte could see it, the dark red stains seeping through the paper. Blood. Armando took it without flinching, said something low in Italian, and disappeared into his office. Charlotte sat frozen at the beautiful table, candlelight flickering, the taste of wine still on her tongue. For 3 days, she'd let herself forget, but the bloodied envelope was a reminder she couldn't ignore. Armando Mancini wasn't playing pretend. He was the monster everyone said he was, and she'd just asked him to hold her hand in front of her family. Saturday arrived too quickly. Charlotte hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that bloodied envelope, heard the cold efficiency in Marco's voice. Delivery from the Volkov crew. She'd scrubbed Armando's office for months without truly understanding what those pristine floors had witnessed. Now she was bringing him home to her mother. When the black town car pulled up outside the modest Brooklyn brownstone, Charlotte's hands were shaking again. "Breathe," Armando said quietly beside her. He looked devastating in a tailored navy suit, no hat today, his dark hair perfectly styled. Respectable, safe. Nothing like the man who'd accepted a blood-stained envelope without flinching. "I can't do this," Charlotte whispered. His hand covered hers, warm, steady. "Yes, you can." Before she could respond, the front door burst open and Jasmine came running down the steps, squealing. There was no turning back now. The Sylvie home smelled like heaven. Collard greens, cornbread, her mother's famous peach cobbler. Gospel music drifted from the living room, where her uncle was already arguing about the Knicks. Laughter, warmth, life. Everything Charlotte's world had been missing. "Baby!" Her mother, Dorothy, emerged from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, eyes bright. Then she saw Armando, and her expression shifted to pure maternal assessment. "Mama, this is Armando Mancini, ma'am." He stepped forward, extending his hand with a slight, respectful bow of his head. "It's an honor to finally meet you. Charlotte speaks of you constantly." Dorothy's eyebrows rose, impressed despite herself. "Does she now?" "Your strength especially," Armando continued smoothly. "Raising 3 children alone, working 2 jobs, Charlotte says everything good in her comes from you." Charlotte's mother actually blushed. "Well, come in, come in. You're too thin, both of you. Let me fix you a plate." As they entered, Armando's hand found the small of Charlotte's back, possessive but gentle. The touch sent electricity up her spine. He was perfect. At dinner, he praised Dorothy's cooking with genuine appreciation, answered questions about his consulting business with charming vagueness, and told stories about how he and Charlotte met that made her almost believe them herself. She spilled coffee on my favorite jacket, he said with a small smile, eyes finding Charlotte's across the table. Apologized 17 times. I knew right then she was special. 17 exactly? Jasmine teased. I counted, Armando replied. I count everything about your sister. The table erupted in knowing laughter and ooze. Charlotte's face burned, but when Armando's fingers laced through hers under the table, the touch felt less like performance and more like promise. How do you take your tea, Armando? Dorothy asked, testing. I don't, ma'am, but Charlotte takes hers with honey, not sugar. Says sugar makes it too sweet. She prefers the complexity. Charlotte's breath caught. He remembered. Dorothy's expression softened completely. You pay attention. To my wife? Armando's thumb brushed Charlotte's hand. Always. The word wife in his voice made something in Charlotte's chest crack open. Everything shattered when Darius walked in. Sorry I'm late. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes landing on Armando. Recognition flashed across his face like lightning. No way. Charlotte's stomach dropped. Darius, Jasmine's fiancé said, confused. You know Charlotte's husband? Darius's smile turned sharp, dangerous. Husband? He laughed, the sound ugly. Charlotte, do you even know who this man is? The room went quiet. Gospel music played on, oblivious. Armando stood slowly, hand finding Charlotte's back. His touch was steady, but she felt the tension coiled beneath it like a snake preparing to strike. I'm her husband, Armando said calmly. And you are? Darius Jenkins, old friend. His eyes glittered. I work security at the Brooklyn docks. You know, the same docks where Mancini Imports does business. He turned to Charlotte. Mancini. Armando Mancini. You really didn't Google him? Charlotte's mother frowned. What are you saying, Darius? I'm saying your daughter married a very private man, Armando interrupted smoothly, who prefers to keep business and family separate. Surely you understand discretion, Mr. Jenkins. Working security, you must see many things you don't repeat. The threat was velvet-wrapped, but unmistakable. Darius's jaw tightened. For a moment, Charlotte thought he'd push. Then something in Armando's expression made him step back. Right, Darius said slowly. Discretion. My mistake. But his smirk promised this wasn't over. The party continued. Surface tension smoothed. By the time they left, Dorothy was hugging Armando and making him promise to come back soon. In the car, silence stretched like a wound. He knows, Charlotte whispered. Yes. What will he do? Armando's jaw tightened, shadows from streetlights cutting across his face. What desperate men always do. Make the wrong choice. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something dark crossed his expression. What? Charlotte asked. Nothing, he lied. I'll handle it. But Charlotte saw the message before he could turn the phone away. Your wife's pretty. Volkov sends his regards. The blood-stained envelope suddenly made terrible sense. They weren't safe. They'd never been safe. And Charlotte had just painted a target on her family's back. The text message hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Your wife's pretty. Volkov sends his regards. Take me home, Charlotte said, voice shaking. Not Brooklyn. My room. Your building. Just please. Armando made a call in rapid Italian. By the time they reached his building, 4 additional cars had materialized around them. A convoy she hadn't noticed until now. She'd been so naive. 3 days later, Charlotte's mother called, voice tight with confusion. Baby, something strange happened. My car tires, all 4, slashed clean through. And there's been a man across the street, just standing there, watching the house. Charlotte's blood went cold. Mama, I need you to listen carefully. Already handled, Armando said from behind her. phone pressed to his ear. Your mother's building has security now. 4 men, rotating shifts. They're instructed to be invisible. Charlotte spun on him. You did what? He ended his call, expression carved from granite. I protected your family. Without asking me? There was no time to ask. Charlotte's hands trembled with rage and terror. This is because of me, because I asked you to lie, and now this is because of Darius Jenkins. Armando cut her off, voice sharp as a blade. He went to the Volkov syndicate, gave them your name, your mother's address, Jasmine's workplace. His jaw tightened. He thought selling information on me would earn him a promotion. The room tilted. How do you know? Because I had him picked up this morning. Charlotte's breath stopped. Picked up? He's alive, Armando said flatly. And very eager to tell me everything he told them. The Volkovs know you exist now, Charlotte. They know you matter to me. That makes you a target. I didn't ask for this. The words ripped from her throat. I didn't ask you to drag my family into your war. You asked me to be your husband. Armando's control finally cracked, voice rising. Or did you think that was just a costume I'd put on and take off? The moment I walked into your mother's house, the moment I called you my wife in front of witnesses, it became real. Not to them, to everyone watching. Then you should have said no. Charlotte's eyes burned. You should have laughed me out of your office instead of what? He moved closer, dangerous and desperate. Instead of wanting it to be true? The confession hit like a shockwave. Charlotte froze. What? Armando's expression fractured, fury giving way to something raw and unguarded. You think I agreed to this as a favor? Out of pity? He laughed bitterly. I noticed you the first day you walked into my office, Charlotte. The way you hummed while you worked, the way you never asked for anything, the way you made yourself small so the world wouldn't see how bright you were. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I told myself it was nothing, he continued, voice dropping, that I was too old, too broken, too stained by blood to deserve even the thought of someone like you. But then you walked into my office and asked me to be your husband, and I... He stopped, jaw working. I said yes, because I'm a selfish bastard who wanted to pretend just for one day that I was the kind of man you deserved. Silence crashed between them. Charlotte's voice came out barely a whisper. You're protecting my family because you asked me to be your husband, Armando finished, eyes locked on hers. This is what husbands do. They protect. They stand between the people they love and the darkness. His hand lifted, hesitating near her face. Even when the darkness is their own. Tears spilled down Charlotte's cheeks. I didn't ask you to love me. I know. His thumb caught a tear with devastating gentleness. But I do anyway. The truth settled over them like gravity. The lie they'd built had collapsed, not into nothing, but into something far more dangerous than either had anticipated, something real. Charlotte's hand covered his, holding it against her face. What do we do now? Armando's expression hardened with purpose. Now I end this. Before they take you from me. They already have, she whispered. I'm terrified. Of them. Of you. Of this. Good, he said quietly. Fear means you understand what's at stake. His forehead touched hers. But I swear on everything I am, they will not touch you. Outside, the city glittered with oblivious life. Inside, a maid and a monster stood on the precipice of a war neither had wanted, but both would fight, together. The next morning, the illusion of calm shattered. Charlotte woke to the sharp buzz of her phone and a voice she didn't recognize. Low, deliberate, cruel. You shouldn't have lied for him, the caller said. Then came Malik's voice, strangled with fear. Charlie. The line cut, her world tilted. The cup in her hand slipped and shattered on the kitchen floor. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then she was already moving, grabbing her coat, her bag, nothing else. The cold elevator mirrors flashed her pale reflection back at her, eyes wild, hands shaking. By the time she burst into Armando's office, her voice was gone. He was already standing behind the desk when she arrived, his phone pressed to his ear. Marco, his second in command, was beside him, jaw tight. One look at Charlotte's face, and Armando ended the call. "Who?" he demanded. Her throat worked, but the words wouldn't come out. She shoved the phone toward him. "They took Malik, my brother." For a heartbeat, he didn't react. Then the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The laptop lid closed with a decisive click. Armando's tone, calm but lethal, filled the space. "When?" "An hour ago. He was leaving class." "They called from his number." "Did they say who they were?" Charlotte nodded weakly. "They said," her voice broke, "they said you'd know why." Armando's gaze turned to steel. "The Varela family." Charlotte blinked. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he strode to the window, pulling out his phone. "Marco, get every location we have on Varela trucks, now, and find Malik Sylvie's last known signal." Charlotte grabbed his arm. "Armando, stop, please. I asked you for help, not war." He turned slowly, eyes dark beneath the shadow of his hat. "War is the only language they understand." Her stomach twisted. "You promised to protect us, not destroy everything around us." "I'm keeping that promise," he said coldly. "And I'll bury anyone who tries to prove me wrong." The words should have terrified her, but all she could think about was Malik, her little brother with the soft laugh and the half-finished engineering projects cluttering his dorm desk. She stepped between Armando and the door. "You can't just—" "I can," he said, his voice cutting through her panic. "And I will." "Then I'm coming with you." His jaw flexed. "No." "Yes." He stared at her for a long, dangerous moment. "This isn't a movie, Charlotte. You think you can handle what I do? You think you can stomach what has to be done?" "I think my brother's life is worth facing anything," she shot back. "Even your world." Something flickered behind his eyes. Respect, fear, maybe both. Finally, he exhaled sharply and nodded to Marco. "Get her a vest." Within minutes, the penthouse turned into a command center. Maps spread across the desk. Phones rang. Men armed with pistols and encrypted radios moved like a silent army through the hallway. The air smelled of adrenaline and gun oil. Charlotte stood off to the side, trying to steady her hands, as Marco strapped a lightweight vest around her chest. "Stay behind me," he murmured, "no matter what happens." She nodded numbly, but her eyes were fixed on Armando. He had changed his suit jacket for a tactical coat, his expression carved from ice. Every inch of him radiated danger. And yet, when his gaze found hers, there was something human again. "You don't have to see this," he said quietly. She swallowed. "I do." The convoy rolled out at dusk, 3 black SUVs slicing through the city's veins, heading south toward the industrial docks. The skyline blurred past in streaks of gold and gray. Charlotte sat beside Armando in the back seat, her pulse keeping time with the hum of the engine. "How did they know about Malik?" she asked finally. Armando's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "They've been watching me since the dinner. Someone tipped them off that you mattered." Her voice broke. "Then this is my fault." He looked at her sharply. "No, this is mine. I brought you into my orbit. They just found a way to use you to hurt me." Silence filled the car after that, thick, suffocating. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the river. When they reached the docks, the air smelled of salt and rust. Floodlights glared against rows of abandoned shipping containers. Armando's men fanned out in formation, weapons drawn. Charlotte followed close behind him, heart hammering so hard it hurt. A phone buzzed. Marco answered, listening, then cursed under his breath. "Got him. North End Warehouse, Unit 12. 2 guards at the door." Armando's hand brushed the gun holster at his side. "We move now." Charlotte grabbed his wrist. "You're not walking in there alone." He gave a grim half smile. "I wasn't planning to." Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows. The only light came from a single hanging bulb, and the sound of Malik's muffled voice crying out. Charlotte lunged forward, but Armando pulled her back, finger to his lips. He gestured to two of his men, who slipped ahead. A sharp scuffle, two thuds, then silence. When Armando signaled the all clear, Charlotte ran. Her knees hit the concrete as she reached Malik, tied to a chair, bruised but alive. "It's okay," she whispered, cutting the ropes with trembling hands. "You're okay, baby. I've got you." But behind her, the echo of footsteps returned. More men, more guns. Armando spun, firing before they could raise theirs. The air exploded with sound, metal, shouting, smoke. Charlotte shielded Malik as bullets tore through the darkness. "Go!" Armando shouted, reloading. "Get him out!" "No!" she screamed back. "I'm not leaving you!" He looked over his shoulder, fury flashing into something softer. "You already did the impossible once, Charlotte. Let me do mine." Marco grabbed her arm, dragging her and Malik toward the back exit. As they stumbled into the night, Charlotte turned just long enough to see Armando still standing in the center of the chaos, gun steady, his silhouette outlined by firelight and grit. Moments later, the sound of police sirens wailed in the distance. They reached the SUV, just as the first explosion tore through the warehouse. Charlotte screamed his name, but the only answer was the roar of flames rising into the night. Marco gripped her shoulders. "He knew what he was doing," he said roughly. Charlotte's heart shattered. The city skyline blurred through her tears as the car sped away. In the darkness, she whispered the word that had started it all. Together. And prayed it hadn't ended there. Smoke. Fire. The world had turned to noise and chaos. Charlotte stumbled from the SUV, heart slamming against her ribs, the warehouse before her burning like an open wound against the skyline. Marco's grip was firm on her arm, trying to hold her back, but she tore free, the sound of her brother's weak voice echoing somewhere inside her skull. "He's still in there!" she shouted. "Charlotte!" Marco lunged, but she was already running, her boots slapping against wet asphalt, heat rolling over her skin. Every breath tasted of iron and ash. She ducked under the half-collapsed shutter, coughing as black smoke clawed her throat. Inside, gunfire still cracked through the haze. Flashes of light illuminated moving shadows, men shouting in Italian, others yelling back in Spanish. The scent of blood, gunpowder, and burning oil twisted together until it was hard to tell where fear ended and fury began. "Armando!" she screamed, voice hoarse, and then, there he was. Through the smoke, she saw him. Hat gone, shirt blood-smeared, his gun raised as he advanced on a figure she recognized even before his mocking laugh split the air. Darius. He stood beside a metal stairway, pistol in hand. Arrogance etched into every movement. "Still cleaning up after powerful men, Charlotte?" he sneered. "You never learn, do you?" Charlotte froze. For a moment, the world fell away. This was the man who'd broken her heart, belittled her ambition, made her believe she was less, the man who had handed her brother's life over for money. But when she stepped into the light, her voice didn't shake. "No, Darius, I chose this one." Her words cut through the chaos. Armando glanced at her, just for a second, but that single look carried everything, warning, disbelief, and something deeper. Darius smirked, lifting his gun toward her. "Bad choice, sweetheart." He didn't get another word out. Armando fired. The bullet tore through Darius's shoulder, spinning him into the metal railing. His weapon clattered to the floor. "Marco!" Armando barked. His lieutenant appeared from the shadows, leading two men who quickly neutralized the remaining guards. Charlotte should have run. She should have taken Malik and left. But as she turned toward the far side of the warehouse, she saw her brother, still bound, half-conscious, guarded by one of the Varela soldiers, gun pressed to his temple. "Don't move!" the man roared, jerking Malik upright. Charlotte's pulse exploded in her ears. "Let him go!" Armando started toward them, but the guard only pressed the gun harder. "One step closer, boss, and I paint the floor with his blood." Armando stopped. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. The man's eyes flicked toward him, just for an instant. And in that moment, Charlotte moved. She grabbed the broken length of rebar from the floor and swung. It cracked against the guard's jaw with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, gun firing once into the ceiling before collapsing. "Malik!" she cried, dropping beside her brother. His pulse fluttered weakly under her fingers, but he was alive. "It's okay. It's over." Armando's men closed in, disarming the remaining Varela soldiers. The air still hummed with gunfire from outside, but inside, the storm was ending. Then came the sound, a single, sharp gunshot that didn't belong to any of them. Armando jerked back. For a moment, Charlotte didn't understand what had happened. Then she saw the blood blooming through his shirt, dark and fast. "No!" She caught him as he fell, her knees hitting the cold concrete. His weight was heavy against her, his breathing ragged. Darius was slumped against the wall, a pistol trembling in his hand. "If I'm going down," he spat, "Maxine, I'm taking him with me." Charlotte's scream drowned out the next gunshot. Marco's bullet hit Darius square in the chest, ending him where he sat. But Charlotte barely heard it. She pressed her hands against Armando's wound, her fingers slick with blood. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please, you can't." He tried to speak, but the effort twisted his face with pain. "You're safe," he managed. "That's all that matters." "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare make this about me." Around them, Armando's men moved like shadows, securing the perimeter, shouting orders. But the noise dimmed, swallowed by the pounding of her heartbeat. Armando's eyes fluttered open, locking on hers. "Charlotte." She shook her head, tears streaking down her face. "Don't talk. Just hold on. Marco's calling for the car. We're getting you out." His hand lifted weakly, finding hers. His fingers brushed her cheek, smearing blood across her skin. "I told you not to come," he whispered. "And you should know by now I never listen," she said, voice breaking. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "Stubborn woman." Charlotte pressed her forehead against his. You said we'd do this together." "We did." His eyes closed, but his breathing steadied faintly as Marco and two men lifted him onto a stretcher improvised from tarp and wood. As they carried him toward the exit, Charlotte followed, her hand gripping his until the last possible moment. The warehouse crackled behind them, gunfire fading, smoke rising like the ghosts of everything they'd survived. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far off. Rain began to fall, thin, cold, washing soot from her face. She looked back once, watching the flames consume the building that had nearly swallowed them all. When the stretcher was loaded into the SUV, Armando's fingers twitched again, reaching blindly. Charlotte climbed in beside him, clutching his hand tight. His eyes flickered open one last time. "You saved him," he murmured. "You saved Malik." "I wasn't leaving him behind," she said softly. A pause, then quieter. "You didn't leave me either." She leaned down, her tears falling onto his collar. "Never." The convoy roared away from the burning docks. Through the rain-streaked window, Charlotte watched the glow fade into the night, the end of one war and the beginning of another battle entirely. In her lap, Armando's hand was still warm but trembling. She pressed it against her chest, whispering the only word that mattered anymore. "Together." And this time, it wasn't a plea. It was a vow. The first thing Armando felt was pain, sharp and insistent, radiating from his left shoulder where the bullet had torn through. The second thing he felt was warmth. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light of the private hospital room. Monitors beeped softly. Dawn was breaking through the window, painting everything in shades of gold and ash. And there, slumped in the chair beside his bed, was Charlotte. She'd fallen asleep holding his hand, her cheek pressed against their intertwined fingers. Her maid's uniform was gone, replaced by jeans and one of his dress shirts, sleeves rolled up, collar stained with what looked like his blood. Her natural hair was pulled back, exhaustion written in every line of her face. She'd stayed. Through the surgery, through the night, through the aftermath of violence that should have sent her running. She'd stayed. Something in Armando's chest cracked open, something that had been locked away since the day he'd buried his first wife, since the day he'd decided that love was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. "Charlotte," he whispered, voice rough from disuse. Her eyes flew open, immediately alert. "Armando!" Relief flooded her face. "Oh God, you're awake. Don't move. I'll get the doctor. Stay." His hand tightened on hers. "Please." She froze, then slowly sank back into the chair, tears already sliding down her cheeks. "You died," she said, voice breaking. "In the ambulance. For 43 seconds you were gone, and I'm here." He pulled her closer with his good arm until she was half leaning over the bed, their faces inches apart. "I'm here because you were there, because you ran into that warehouse like an avenging angel and distracted them long enough for Marco to—" He stopped, shaking his head. "You saved me." "You took a bullet for me," Charlotte whispered. "You saw that man aim at me, and you just moved." "And I'd do it again." The words were absolute. 1,000 times, Charlotte. I'd take 1,000 bullets if it meant you kept breathing. Fresh tears spilled. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes me believe you might actually—" She couldn't finish. "Love you?" Armando's thumb traced her jaw with infinite tenderness. "I do. I have since the day you asked me to be your husband, maybe even before." A sob caught in her throat. "I'm done, Charlotte," he continued, voice gaining strength. "The business, the empire, all of it. Marco can take over. He's been ready for years. I'm pulling out, slowly, carefully, so no one else gets hurt, but I'm done." "You'd give up everything." "It's not everything," he interrupted. "Power means nothing if it endangers what I love, if it puts you in harm's way, if it means I wake up in a hospital bed instead of beside you." His forehead touched hers. "You broke me, Charlotte, shattered every wall I built, and I've never been more whole." Her breath hitched. "I never wanted to trap you. I just wanted to be seen. For once in my life, I wanted to matter to someone." "You saw me," Armando said softly. "The real me, beneath the monster. You looked at the devil himself and still asked him to hold your hand." His voice roughened with emotion. "You're all I see, Charlotte. All I want to see. I'm just a maid. You're the woman who made a mafia boss remember what it means to be human." His hand cupped her face. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. And if you'll have me, not as a pretend husband, not as an arrangement, but as a man who loves you more than he's ever loved anything." Charlotte kissed him. Not the desperate kisses they'd stolen in moments of fear, not the performative touches at her family's dinner. This was a choice. This was the truth. This was two broken people deciding to be whole together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Charlotte whispered, "I love you. God help me. I love you." Armando smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face. "Then God help us both, wife." Through the window, the sun rose over New York. The darkness was finally giving way to light. 6 months later. The Sylvie backyard had been transformed. String lights crisscrossed above the small garden, turning the Brooklyn evening into something magical. Tables overflowed with food, Dorothy's peach cobbler, Jasmine's pasta salad, contributions from every aunt and cousin who'd insisted on being part of the celebration. Charlotte's wedding reception, the real one. She stood near the makeshift dance floor in a simple white dress, watching Armando argue good-naturedly with her Uncle James about the Knicks. No dark suit today, just rolled-up shirt sleeves and genuine laughter. No bodyguards flanking the gates. No guns hidden beneath tailored jackets. Just a man who'd walked away from an empire to build something better. "Look at him," Dorothy said, appearing beside Charlotte with 2 glasses of sweet tea. "Fits right in, like he's always been family." Charlotte smiled, accepting the glass. He's trying. Trying? Her mother laughed. Baby, that man funded the new community center on Malcolm X Boulevard. He's hiring ex-cons for his legitimate businesses. He sits through your grandmother's 3-hour church services without complaint. She shook her head, eyes warm. When you asked for a husband for one day, you didn't say he'd never leave. Charlotte's throat tightened with emotion. I didn't know what I was asking for. Yes, you did, Dorothy said softly. You asked for someone who'd see you. And he does. Every time he looks at you, baby, that man sees. Across the yard, Armando's eyes found Charlotte's, as if he'd felt her watching. He excused himself and crossed to her. Hand extended. Dance with me, Mrs. Mancini? The name still sent shivers through her. We danced twice already. Then we'll dance a third time. His smile was gentle. She didn't have to ask twice. Dorothy laughed, dabbing her eyes. I'm getting more cobbler. You two are too sweet for my blood sugar. As she walked away, Armando pulled Charlotte into his arms. Someone had put on an old jazz song, the kind she used to hum while cleaning his office, back when she thought invisibility kept you safe. Happy? He murmured against her hair. Terrified, Charlotte admitted. That I'll wake up and this will all be pretend again. It was never pretend, not for me. His hand splayed across her back. You know what I'm doing Tuesday? What? Meeting with the scholarship committee, the one you made me establish. His eyes crinkled. Apparently, we have 200 applicants for the Charlotte Mancini Education Fund. Tears blurred her vision. You named it after me. You're the reason it exists. You're the reason any of the good things exist. He spun her gently under the lights. A maid walked into my office and asked for one day. She gave me a lifetime. Charlotte kissed him, soft and unhurried, tasting like sweet tea and promise. Around them, families cheered and whistled. Jasmine shouted something about getting a room. Uncle James turned the music up louder. As they swayed together under Brooklyn stars, Charlotte thought about that trembling woman who'd begged a monster for help. She'd wanted respect, safety, to be seen. She'd found something better, herself. Sometimes, the lie we tell to survive becomes the truth that saves us. And sometimes, pretending for one day gives you everything you'd stopped believing you deserved.